Hello, everyone. Welcome to Workers' World Thursday night webinars. This one is about Leslie Feinberg. My name is Ezra Echo. I'm a young, non-binary lesbian member of the party, and I use the pronouns they, them, and ze here. This week marks the 6th anniversary of Leslie's death. And also this week is Trans Day of Remembrance, which is one of the reasons that we chose this webinar. Leslie joined the party in 1973. Z defined herself as an anti-racist, white, working-class, secular Jewish, transgender, lesbian, female, revolutionary communist. Leslie was extremely passionate about fighting injustice wherever it reared its ugly head. Z was really the first to develop a Marxist analysis of the transgender struggle. I also want to ask that whatever you're watching this on, please share the stream on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And now I would like to introduce my co-moderator, Judy Greenspan, who is a member of the Prisoner Solidarity Committee and also in the Bay Area branch of Workers' World Party. Judy uses they, them pronouns.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ezra, and I'm really looking forward to co-moderating with you. My job right now is to give us all a short explanation of what to expect tonight. Tonight is going to be a discussion, not only about Leslie Feinberg and the impact Z had on our lives, but how Here Life inspires us to continue fighting for revolutionary change in this country. We want to bring the spirit of Leslie Feinberg into 2020. We want to bring it into the struggles that are happening today. The struggle for transgender liberation, which Leslie joined with all her passion, is part of all of our movements today, from Black Lives Matter to the fight to abolish ICE and to close the detention and really the concentration camps. It is such an honor to be part of this program and to be part of this discussion. And we have a great panel tonight. My job, a great panel tonight of cross-generational revolutionary comrades. And so it's my honor to introduce our panel. And I'm going to ask all the panelists to put their videos on while I do this. So we have with us Devin Cole as president of Strive, a transgender advocacy organization in Pensacola. Devin is also a member of the Workers' World Party Central Gulf Coast branch and uses the pronouns they and them. We also have Marinda Chrisman, and they are the co-editor of Tear Down the Walls page of Workers' World newspaper, member of the Prisoner Solidarity Committee and Houston branch of Workers' World Party. Marinda uses they, them pronouns. I'm waiting on tech to give us a gallery view of this. Oh, good. Excellent. Okay. And then we have Monica Moorhead. And Monica is a managing editor of Workers' World newspaper, editor of the book Marxism, Reparations and the Black Freedom Struggle, and an executive board member of International Women's Alliance. Monica uses the pronouns she, her. Renee, last but not least, we have Renee Imperato, who is a disabled transgender activist. Renee is chairperson of the SAGE Advisory Council, which is the senior LGBTQ center, and a member of Workers' World Party New York City and People's Power Assemblies. So tonight, Devin is going to start the conversation. We're going to ask our panelists a lead-in question, and then we're hoping that other people will join in so that we can actually have, as much as you can within Zoom, have a roundtable discussion. So Devin, you are a founder of Strive and a very much a revolutionary activist in Pensacola, Florida. How did Leslie Feinberg inspire you to become a revolutionary transgender activist?
So, and thank you, Judy, and thank you, Ezra, for moderating this tonight. I'm very excited. So I became the president of Strive in 2017, which is Socialist Trans Initiative. And like like Judy said, we are a transgender advocacy organization. We're the only one of our kind for over 200 miles around, based out of Escambia County in Northwest Florida. So early on in my advocacy career, I would say when I was 19 or 20, I knew that I was a socialist of some sort, as just as well as I knew I was transgender. However, connecting the two was proving to be a challenge for me. And through a very funny set of coincidences, I stumbled across Butch Blues, which was Leslie Feinberg's, that was her first book of fiction, a phenomenal, groundbreaking book. I stumbled across it in our local leftist bookstore, Open Books, and I bought it. And I'm someone who does not read fiction a lot anymore, but I bought it and I read it I remember I read it in 2 sittings, and I just remember the moment at the end of the book where Jess is Jess is finally realizing, their place as a transgender communist, getting into union organizing. And I remember just having that moment where it clicked. So it was, it was a book of fiction, surprisingly, that brought me to connect the struggle with transgender oppression to the class struggle. And then, of course, reading further, in college, I based my senior thesis on Transgender Warriors. Leslie's another groundbreaking book by Leslie Feinberg that outlines the history of transgender struggle against capitalism and imperialism and colonialism. And, tying together the struggle against racism with the struggle against transphobia, with the struggle against capitalism. Leslie did this almost 30 years ago at this point. And we owe we owe so much. We owe so much to here. That, the only thing we can do at this point to really honor Leslie Feinberg is to continue the struggle against transgender oppression and continue the struggle against capitalism. Anything else would simply be a disservice. And so we utilize a lot of the beliefs and a lot of the struggles of Leslie Feinberg in Strive. Our primary goals being housing for the transgender movement, being free hormone replacement therapy, providing money and allocations to working class transgender people, and so we carry a lot of, our name is Socialist Trans Initiative, and we do consider ourselves Marxist in perspective and Marxist in practice. And we owe all of that to Leslie Feinberg, as well as Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, Genesette Gutierrez, and other revolutionary transgender people who have paved the way for this class struggle that we are involved in.
So I'm wondering, would anyone else like to add in to what Devin just talked about in terms of sort of what inspiration Leslie was to them or any of the experiences? Go ahead, Renee.
Hi.
No.
Well, I first met Leslie not long after I came back from Vietnam in the war that I became what they called a seditionist, but wasn't quite yet a communist. And, I just want to say, we're talking almost 50 odd years ago when the unbelievable, overwhelming oppression of trans people was when you went out into the street. I mean, it was a battle. And I'm not going to get into specifics, but you always had something to defend yourself. And Leslie wasn't just, I don't like the word just, but Leslie was not part of, just revolutionizing society, but the movement itself. And Leslie was such an inspiration to me at the age of, I guess I was 23. So that's 49 years ago. And I guess what I wanted to say was, I wonder if the Leslie Feinbergs of the world, in addition to the Lorena Boras and Cecilia Gentili, and of course Marcia and Sylvia, where would we be without them collectively? And so I just want to say that Leslie Feinberg was in the absolute vanguard of our liberation, way before many of us. I, as a trans woman, when I met Leslie, I can tell you what I was. I was an unconscious male impersonator, which is what a phase that many trans women go through. And let me just leave it at that, to say that reading Leslie's work and the countless conversations, whether it was about Paris's burning, whether it was about the Elks Lodge on 127th Street, whether it was about the Gang of Four in China, Leslie was and always should be remembered as the most revolutionary communist. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to add on to this conversation?
Well, this is Monica.
Yes, Monica.
Well, I'm going to speak a little later about Leslie, but Z plays such a, of course, every comrade in our party is very precious. Like every revolutionary is precious. And of course, Leslie was no exception to that. But in terms of my own evolution, as a revolutionary communist, I just want to share that, Leslie was very instrumental in me becoming a managing editor of Workers' Row newspaper. Z was so encouraging. And, because I was very reluctant because, I didn't have a lot of necessarily skills in terms of, I wrote, but in terms of being an editor and what that all entailed and so forth, I was very reluctant because I didn't have full confidence that I could do it. But Leslie just continued to talk to me constantly about, it's not only can you do it, but why it's important for you to be a managing editor of the paper, being, a person of color and all that you can bring to, to this very important area of party life. And just individually, Leslie, again, was very, very instrumental in me saying yes to this, because she was very encouraging without being condescending or patronizing or anything like that. She was always putting the party first in whatever, whatever she was doing. And I'll just end with this, because I think, Leslie was probably the most well-known party member because of all of the amazing and important theoretical contributions that Z made, to the struggle for, sexual identity and sexual liberation, especially trans liberation. And I just want to share this one story and then I'll get off. It really hit home to me how the impact that Leslie had globally, in this important struggle, because I was able to go to Sydney, Australia, for vacation several years ago and stumbled upon a demonstration. Some teachers had gone out on strike. And so there was this rally going on in downtown Sydney, and a table was set up of, young radical leftist activists. And so another friend of mine, we were talking about, party affiliations. And so I said, well, I'm a member of Workers' World Party. And they said, oh, tell us more about, your party and so forth, and they happened to have some LGBTQ plus literature. And I said, well, have you ever heard of Leslie Feinberg? I don't know. And they were like, Leslie Feinberg, I said, well, Leslie Feinberg is a member of Workers' World Party. And well, they didn't know, they said, well, we really didn't know that, but we know Leslie Feinberg. We admire Leslie so much. And so that sort of broke the ice in terms of, talking to these young, revolutionaries. And it just hit home to me, just the global reach that, Leslie and had with the movement around the world. So anyway, I just wanted to share that very, important story on disease impact and continues to have today.
Thank you, Monica. Before I move on to the next question too, I just wanted to say that I read Leslie's works when I moved here. I live in Buffalo, where Leslie lived for a long time and where Stone Butch Blues is set. And it is a work of fiction, but suddenly I could see so many years of history, a path that so many people had walked before I got there. And it was life-changing, truly. So the next question is for Miranda. Miranda, as the co-editor of the Tear Down the Walls page of Workers' World newspaper and a leader in the Prisoner Solidarity Committee, what was Leslie's relationship to what you are doing now? And how were you inspired by what Z did?
Thank you, Ezra. Even though I never had the honor of meeting here while Z was alive, Comrade Leslie's presence is still felt in so much of what I do. As was mentioned, I'm currently a co-editor alongside Ted Kelly of Tear Down the Walls. And we draw on the organizing power and words and world building capacity of Leslie Feinberg, who not just came before us, but is still with us, as we aim to build the kind of society that makes prison walls obsolete for our collective class. Before we relaunch these prisoner pages, which do make their way into prisons, like physically, I look to the pages of the past, so shaped by Leslie for literal inspiration. So he is such a force that we can still feel today. And I have to say, one of my biggest takeaways is like I've gotten from studying all the material that everyone's talked about so far, is that the things that we're fighting for as revolutionaries are deeply interconnected. Leslie sat at Leslie was on vanguard in the epicenter of many of these things alongside so many of the comrades in this party and tied all of these issues together that affect so many of us. And I'm really grateful to be continuing on in this work with just so much determination to carry on building the presence of abolition and revolution.
Thank you, Miranda. Are you done? Are you done? Should we? Okay. Are there other people who would like to add on to this conversation? I will tell you that, you know, the struggle behind the walls is becoming a very, very critical struggle now in the midst of the rebellions going on in the streets and also the whole struggle to not only abolish the police, but abolish ICE and abolish all of the repressive mechanisms of the current government. But Leslie was there first. Leslie was, you know, very much inspired by and was the prison page editor at the time of shortly after Attica. And I don't think I ever told anybody this because it was like a minute in time. But the 1 year that I lived in New York City when I joined the party, Leslie had to step away for some reason, and Z gave me the prison page and said, please, would you take over the prison page for, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months or something like that. And really spent a lot of time making sure that I knew how to do it, that I had a relationship to the prisoners who were writing, to the people in the party who were writing. And one of the things that I can take away from Leslie is that Z always was teaching. Z always was mentoring younger comrades, and younger, you know, 5 years. So I'm 5 years younger at the time. I guess I was quite young. But Z was always bringing people into the struggle. And Z is one of the reasons that I joined Workers' World Party. and that was 1976.
Could I tell a short street story about Leslie and Marcia?
Sure, please do.
So it was 1991, and we were in the Pride Parade. And at the time that we approached 23rd Street and 5th Avenue, birds of a feather do flock. So somehow there was Sylvia, Marcia, Leslie, and many people. And when we got to 23rd Street and 5th Avenue, there were, well, I'm not going to use that term, but let me just say white gay men, right? Disrespecting Marcia and ridiculing Marcia. And I want you all to understand, this is the language of the day now, because we're talking like 29 years ago. And I want to tell you, Leslie went over to them on the side of the street and got into their face, and they cowered as Leslie said to them, hell hath no fury like a drag queen scorned. And I mean, the look on their face and just the camaraderie. It's just, I know it's just a small little moment, but it's something that's priceless. It can't be measured or gauged or purchased. I just wanted to leave that image if I could. Thank you. I think I'm gonna...
Oh, I know. This is definitely going to cheer a lot of people up. So anyone else want to add in about, We want to make sure, because we'll be coming back to this. The struggle behind the walls, the struggle of prisoners was so important to Leslie, and we'll be coming back to it. And I would like to invite everyone to put your questions into the Q&A, which is at the bottom of the Zoom page. Or if you're on Facebook, please put them in the comments sections, and we're going to try to get to some of the questions at the end. But you can see it's hard to just say only a few words about Leslie. So we'll see how many questions that we get to. We're going to show a very short video. We have many clips of Leslie speaking at various events, but we chose this one because it sort of epitomizes the here life. It really epitomizes who Leslie was, because one thing that Z always tried to do, like I mentioned, was to educate and to link together the LGBTQ plus movement with the fight in the working class against racism, against white supremacy, and against imperialism. And I think, Devin really talked very, very well about that. And Z was always teaching, and we're going to show a short clip from Leslie's talk at Sonoma State University. I didn't even know that Z was out here doing that talk. But her talk was entitled "The Transgender Movement, Yesterday, Today, and the Future." And Leslie dedicated her talk to the struggle of it's very interesting. Z went into this classroom, Z was speaking on the transgender movement, and the first thing Z said was, "I am dedicating my talk to the struggle of undocumented workers, of immigrant workers." Because on the way in, Z had seen a flyer calling people together to protest in support of immigrant rights. And that's exactly what Leslie always did. She always was showing working class solidarity, always teaching and linking the components of the revolutionary struggle. And now we'll see the video.
It was a hot June night, and the police did what they did. They came in for their payoffs. They came in to raid the bars. They took the drag queens, dumped their heads in buckets of water, and smeared their makeup on their faces, and reminded them that the sentencing could be carried out that night in the backseat of a police cruiser or on the cold cement floor of a precinct cell, and baited them for being limp-wristed sissies. And I handed out for some of you, if you go to workers.org, the series that I've done on lavender and red, I handed this out because I want to be able to refer to things that you can go back and find out more information about, like this Stonewall blow by blow, where I put together all that happened that night, and it'll, I hope, be interesting for you to read. But basically what happened, by most reports, is that someone who the crowd identified as being a butch lesbian was being dragged out by the police, and she fought. She fought back and struggled, and they tried to get her from the bar into the police cruiser, and she got her feet up against the car and wouldn't get in and was kicking and got away and got back into the bar. And the police went back in and dragged her out, and she fought again, and some of the drag queens said to the crowd, "Do something." And of course, who started it? Who led it? Those who had the least to lose and the most to gain from fighting back. It was mostly the homeless youth who were transgender and gay and lesbian. They were mostly Black and Latina and white. Some of them had lived homeless on the streets in New York as transgender youth since they were 10, 11, 12 years old. They knew all about what it meant to be arrested. They still bore the wounds, their bodies and their psyches and their personhood. And they began rocking the police van. They said to the cops, "You can't take our friends away. We're not going to let you." And they took their precious pocket change. People who hadn't eaten that day, they took their pocket change and threw it at the police. They said, "You want your payoffs? Here's your payoffs." And they found bottle caps and bottles and stones, and the police began to retreat. The police, who were so well armed and so aggressive, began to retreat back into the very bar they had raided because the youth that night taught the police that a stiletto high heel in the hands of an enraged transgender youth is a formidable weapon against police repression.
So unfortunately, that was an absolutely fantastic video, but that was not the video that we meant to show. So I am going to ask Tech to please enable me to share my screen so that I can show the video that we really wanted to show that feeds into the rest of this program. So hopefully that has happened. I'm going to assume you've done it, Ted, and now we're going to, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully my sound is going to really work so well. And not as fast as they are, but here we go. This is the one that we really wanted to show.
Where did that come from? Black power. It was the inspiration of the Black Power movement, of the struggles that were going on at that time. It didn't mean it was the same thing as the black movement. If that was true, then the black drag queens would have the exact same oppression as the white drag queens, and that wasn't true. But it's when one group of people who are oppressed rises up to fight back, it creates room in its wake for other people to say, wait, we could be fighting back too. It leads, literally, it leads the way. That the union movement was built on, that an injury to one is an injury to all, and that a victory for one is a victory for all. And we said, of course we're for gay rights now, but why do we have to, what do you mean all these other demands are watering that down? And like, you ever notice when somebody says that the demand against racism is watering down the demand for gay rights, it's usually a white person who's saying that. You know, somebody else's struggle is watering down theirs. No, we learned on the shop floor that if you want to have a really powerful struggle and win a contract, you've got to get everybody's grievances in that contract. Everybody's got to feel that that contract is defending their life. And then everybody has to defend everything in that contract as though it is their own life, because it is. Look, the Black Panther Party is being lined up and shot and framed up. Where are we going to be? Out supporting the Black Panthers. The young lords are facing police repression. Where should gay liberation be? Right at their side, marching with them. Shortly after the Stonewall Rebellion, Huey Newton, who was the leader of the Black Panther Party, issued a statement that reverberated in the movement. He said, wherever the forces of black liberation meet, the forces of gay liberation and women's liberation must be there. And shortly after that, the Young Lords Party started an internal gay caucus and a women's caucus. One of the first members of the gay caucus was Sylvia Rivera, the late Sylvia Rivera, who had lived homeless on the streets in New York as a Latina at that time, at transgender youth since she was 10 years old. And was a combatant at Stonewall. And before she died, I said to her, Sylvia, it just drives me crazy when people say to me, now, was Stonewall a gay rebellion or was it a transgender rebellion? And I told her, I just told them yes.
Okay. I am going to stop sharing mine. And Ezra, I think aren't you? Is this me or you?
You, but I couldn't.
Oh, it is me. Okay. Yes. Well, okay. Why don't you do me a favor? Ask the question.
You got it. Oh, yes, it is me. Monica, can you talk about the importance of solidarity between the LGBTQ plus movement and the struggle for Black lives and how that has developed over time? Also, what role Leslie played in this development? You're on mute, Monica.
Thank you. I just want to say, again, this is an honor to be a part of this really important discussion on the legacy of Comrade Leslie. I would like to begin my answer to these questions by reading a quote from Leslie. This was raised when we had a number of articles honoring Leslie, following her death. And I just want to read this quote from Leslie. I don't know where it was actually said, but it sort of sums up not only Leslie's impact, but the impact that the party has had on Leslie in terms of Z's political development and worldview. So this is a direct quote from Leslie. I do not believe that our sexuality, gender expression, and bodies can be liberated without making a ferocious mobilization against imperialist war and racism, an integral part of our struggle. And hold on just a minute. And I think this really sums up the fact that when you talk about, capitalism and imperialism, which is the worldwide system of capitalism, there's so many inequalities and so many oppressions that feed off of capitalism and imperialism, including LGBTQ plus oppression. And but Leslie never allowed this to be seen in isolation, because Leslie understood, as a worker, Leslie was a worker first and foremost, part of the working class, that there's nothing more important than to be in solidarity with each other against a common enemy, which is capitalism and imperialism. And I just want to say that there's a famous quote, I don't know where it comes from, but the quote is, class oppression is primary, but racism is not secondary. And Leslie understood this so well. When Leslie was talking about the fact, even within the various movements, whether you talk about the women's movement or women and the gender oppressed movement, or the LGBTQ plus movement, or any progressive movement, racism, the racist oppression impacts all of these different struggles. And we don't compare oppressions. We don't say, well, this oppression is more, greater than this oppression. That's not what our party is all about, because we're all about building solidarity. However, we understand that when you talk about white supremacy and racism, that strategically these struggles impact all the different struggles because of the nature of imperialism. You talk about oppressed nations, and within these oppressed nations are other kinds of inequalities that take place. Whether you talk about, Black gay people or Black trans women, all of this comes into play in terms of looking at these oppressions within the framework of fighting for national liberation, which a lot of these different forces, this is how they frame their oppression, and this is how they frame their struggle. So Leslie understood this so well, and was always conscious of the role that white supremacy and racism plays within, the various struggles, not just the, trans oppression or, lesbian and gay oppression, etc., but all of the different, movements. And I just want to end with this example And Leslie not only understood this in theory, but understood it in practice, was always thinking about how to build solidarity with the most oppressed, especially those who are, on the front lines, against racism, those who are the most victimized by racism. And that's the struggle to free Mumia Abu-Jamal, the political prisoner. And Leslie was instrumental, was one of the founding members when there was this huge struggle back in the late 90s, early 2000s to win a new trial for Mumia Abu-Jamal, who was framed up in the early 1980s for killing a white police officer in Philadelphia, and has been in prison for almost 40 years now. It'll be 40 years next year. So we decided to build this huge rally for Mumia at Madison Square Garden Theater back in 2000. And Leslie was instrumental, along with other party members, in building a mass unit in a broad sense. The party was a part of it, but the party was not the only group of that was part of this, but a rainbow flags for Mumia. And I tell you, it was so dynamic, so exciting. I think Sylvia Rivera was part of this movement of the rainbow flags for Mumia. And I think maybe half of the garden was filled with, members who identified with rainbow flags for Mumia. And Leslie gave a powerful talk regarding why it's important to not only support Mumia's right to a new trial, but tying that in with the struggle against racism and white supremacy as a way to build class unity and solidarity. And so anyway, that was a very important pillar of what Leslie Feinberg was all about. And we try to carry on that legacy today with everything we do in the struggle, especially now around the issue of fighting police terror, defending Black Lives Matter, calling for the abolishment of ICE and the police, along with tying that in with the growing economic capitalist crisis that is impacting our entire class. And I think Leslie would really embrace the view that this is a new working global class, and why it's important to embrace every worker, whether they have a job or not, whether they're incarcerated, sex workers, gig workers, young people. Leslie would be in the forefront of explaining this, to large audiences, which Z was able to talk to. And again, whenever Z spoke at a graduation commencement, Z would always bring up the issue of Mumia or other struggles as a way of educating, especially young people. So I'll just end there.
Thank you, Monica. Does anyone else want to weigh in on solidarity between the LGBTQ plus struggle and the Black Lives Matter struggle?
Yes.
Go ahead, Devin.
Last summer here in Pensacola, Tamar Crawford, who is a Black man, was murdered by the Pensacola police in his front yard in front of his partner and children. And Strive immediately was one of the organizations that took on the struggle against the Pensacola police brutality and calling for justice for Tamar. And it's through the example of Leslie Feinberg and Here's massive contribution to free Mumia Abu-Jamal that we were able to do this, and emphasizing that though Tamar Crawford was not transgender, was not even part of the LGBTQ community, that the intersection of racism also inflicts the intersection of transphobia and homophobia. The same police that murdered Tamar Crawford routinely harass and intimidate transgender sex workers or transgender workers of any kind, anybody in the LGBTQ community. And it's through the example and, in the spirit of Leslie Feinberg that we were able to lead this struggle, be one of the leaders of this struggle, leading a march twice on Pensacola Police Department and eventually pushing for the termination of the officer that murdered Tamar Crawford. And so, when we have instances where people in the LGBTQ community recognize the intrinsic links between homophobia and transphobia and racism, it's absolutely something that must be emphasized. And because there can be no liberation without transgender people. There can be no liberation without Black people, without any person of color or colonized person throughout the world. And it's because of people like Leslie Feinberg that we can make these connections and emphasize that and continue the struggle until we win. That's all.
Thank you, Devin. Does anyone else have anything to say on this?
I think Miranda wants to say something.
Miranda?
Yeah, I think a lot of Leslie's body of work with theory and words and practice, talk a lot about how and show how materially our oppression really stems from the same place. And the power that we all have when we align ourselves and our struggles together to move things. We just had a summer of uprisings in defense of Black life. And I know on the streets in Houston, I saw who was fighting those cops that came at us with every weapon, militarized weapon, right? Like they have money for this, but not for houses for any of queer youth have been, estranged from their homes due to attitudes that their families, which family structure, all of this comes from colonialism, and we have a same root in our oppressor. And when we align the power that we have, we can win.
Thank you, Miranda.
Can I say one more thing about Leslie? Yeah. Leslie always was able to see the big picture in a consistent way. And when I say that, when it came to the divide and conquer tactics of the imperialists, like for instance, if some type of atrocity happened in, a colonized country or oppressed country when it came to LGBTQ people, and of course the imperialist press would just bombard, try to pretend that they were the greatest defenders of LGBTQ people's rights. And Leslie always was able to see through that and defend the most oppressed with the understanding that oppression doesn't really come from the most oppressed. It comes from imperialism. It comes from capitalism. And so they were always in a very consistent way able to defend, oppressed colonies or those countries fighting for their sovereignty who may not, be the most progressive on all the different questions, but we're still under the thumb of imperialist, not only plunder, but imperialist ideas, the ruling class ideas, which we all know come from the top down, not from the bottom up. So Leslie, was very exemplary in that way. And so I just wanted to share that, you know, that aspect of her, of Z's contributions, which can be very, very difficult, you know, for the movement to understand if they don't understand the nature of imperialism and capitalism, which Leslie, you know, knew in Here's, you know, Bones. Yeah.
Thank you, Monica. Before I go to the next question, I would like to say that if you like what you've heard so far, or you have been personally inspired by Leslie's words and actions, you should become our comrade. We have branches all over the United States, and we want you to bring your experiences to our militant Revolutionary Party. You can fill out the join form that's on your screen at workers.org, and a member of the party will contact you.
Thank you, Ezra. I'm going to take over now just for a minute. And I know that Renee did want to make a comment. So Renee, you can work it into your answer because now you get to answer your question. Okay. So can I ask the question? Oh,
please.
Oh, yeah. So as someone who is very involved in the transgender movement and has been and has a history in the transgender movement, particularly in New York City, what is Leslie's legacy in this movement and also in the US? And how has that legacy affected your organizing and working in this movement? And then, of course, please feel free to add the comments that you were going to make in the last discussion.
Sure. So let me answer it this way. First of all, and I'm saying this to my comrades in Workers' World Party, the foremost communist party and earliest really to support not just lesbian and gay rights in the early 70s, but in the forefront of transgender liberation in the movement. And when I say that, let me just give you an example. First of all, Leslie Feinberg is heralded in the, and I want to say this carefully, transgender, gender non-conforming, and no gender community. A common term that I use that I once picked up from Leslie, and I repeat, is it is ridiculous to consider that there are only 7 genders. So many of the youth right now well, I'm going to speak specifically for New York City, but I know I'm speaking way beyond that. They have elevated Leslie as one of our greatest liberators. People who are, you know, clubbers, even anarchists, or whom I tend to paint as sort of red anarchists, believe it or not, have tremendous respect for Workers' World. And a lot of that is really because of the contribution of Leslie Feinberg, where I'm just going to say this briefly, and a trans anarchist theater company actually used in part of their set literally the original Workers' World People's Power Assembly signs from demonstrations and used that as part of their set. Let me say this, that is respect. That is recognizing the contribution, vanguarded in many ways as trans GNC non-gendered people by Leslie Feinberg. There is no way to gauge me to my comrades how respected Leslie is. For instance, I'm sort of really active Facebook Instagram, and Twitter. I'm going to tell you this. I'm browsing with my butterfly sister, trans sex workers, and I'm coming across retweets, repostings of our presentation tonight with Leslie Feinberg, Remember Me as a Revolutionary Communist. And I thought, wait a minute, I don't even know these people. So what it shows is that the influence of Leslie is beyond even our knowledge. There's conversations happening right now about Leslie Feinberg without Workers' World Party comrades. And that is a salute, if I may, to let the love that our community has for Leslie, as much as I can't help but say it, the contribution of Sylvia. How about Sylvia and Marsha P. Johnson hustling on 42nd Street at the age of 14 and 15 in 1965? Okay, so let me leave it with summarize that part this way. Recently, there was unfortunately the murder of a Black gender nonconforming MX Bostic about 2 years ago, not far from our party offices and the Sage Center, which is very close together. And it was organized by trans women, Black trans women in BLM. But the attendees of this, where we went with signs, the party went, PPA, trans, gender nonconforming, non-gendered people, united with our comrades of color in our community. Okay, that's what I wanted to say. I also wanted to say that I was part.
Renee, can you wrap up in about a minute so that we can get to some more discussion on this question?
Well, can I just read the 10 names?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
So before this presentation tonight, I participated in SAGE's annual Transgender Day of Remembrance. We have more than one now. And what happens is they read the names of those who may have either passed, but especially those who have been murdered. I'm not going to read their bios. I'm going to read their name and their age. And I'm going to start right now. Tony McDade, 38. Selena Reyes Hernandez, 37. Rhea Milton, 23. Dominique Rennie Fells, 27. Brian Powers, 43. Brayla Stone, 17. Mia Green, 29. Arian Burnett, 37. Keith Sam, 24. Aja Raquel Rone Spears, 32. Keisha T. Hardy, 22. Tiffany Harris Dior Ova, 32. Presente. May I now ask for 30 seconds as a moment of silence, commencing right now. Thank you, comrades. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Renee. Does anyone else want to speak for a little while about this? If not, we can always move on to the next question because we are getting up there in time.
Would you like a cup of hot tea? Okay.
Before we move to the next question, there's a few things that we want to bring up. We are happy to announce that we have resumed printing hard copies of Workers' World newspaper again on a monthly basis after temporarily suspending hard copy production due to the COVID-19 pandemic. You can also subscribe to receive Workers' World newspaper by email at workers.org. Leslie made amazing literary contributions to our movement and to the developing Marxist analysis of LGBTQ+ oppression. On the Workers' World Party website, www.workers.org, we have several of Leslie's books, Lavender and Red, Rainbow Solidarity in Defense of Cuba, and Transgender Liberation, a movement whose time has come. These books are available for free download at workers.org/books. These are all books about the LGBTQ+ struggle. The groundbreaking novel Stone Butch Blues by Leslie is also available for free download at Leslie's website and has recently been made available in print at lulu.com. Good, you're muted.
Yeah, Marnie. Thank you so much, Ezra. And thank you so much, Renee, for a really, really heartfelt talk and for reading the names. And someone has asked that the names be put in the chat, and I'm not sure if you're able to do that. So we'll have to figure out something, maybe later on, send them out or something like that. But
Sage has prepared a list that I can forward to the emails.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And Renee, can you go on mute for the next period and then when you win? Okay, thank you. Perfect. Okay. So we're about to actually look at the audience questions and hopefully open up a larger discussion. And I was going to say something and I'm going to cut it very, very short because I really want to hear from the panel and I really want to hear the questions from the audience. But there's one other book which we didn't mention, which was in the slides, which was called The Roots of Lesbian and Gay Oppression. Please don't, thank you. It's called The Roots of Lesbian and Gay Oppression, and it's also available for download. And the only reason that I mention it is because that book, when it was in draft form, is what really brought me to the party. That, of course, in meeting Leslie. And this was back in 1976, and there was a big debate in the movement. Is it revolutionary to be gay? Is it revolutionary to be a lesbian? And there was one part of the movement that said, no, it's not. The working class isn't ready for it, as if no one in the working class was lesbian or gay. And Workers' World Party developed a treatise that was written by Bob McCubbin. And Bob and Leslie collaborated on a lot of different writings at this time. And it really was the example of Leslie Feinberg and this pamphlet that brought me to Workers' World Party. I said, any party that could welcome Leslie Feinberg and actually print an argument to the left that the LGBTQ+ struggle is a part of the working class movement and a part of the revolutionary struggle in this country and is not a decadent vestige of capitalism, which is what a lot of these groups said. So that is also available for download, and I really urge you to look at it. Now, Leslie would have approved of the next announcement. I know we're giving you a bunch of announcements, but Leslie was very much in demand as a speaker, and Z traveled all around the US and around the world. And at every speaking engagement, Leslie brought up the critical political issues that needed to be raised, that were not necessarily what you would put into, this is from the LGBTQ plus movement. They were not the traditional issues. So now, in the tradition of Leslie Feinberg, or really in the tradition of Workers' World Party, I'd like to give an update about a new book, which is called Capitalism on a Ventilator: The Impact of COVID-19 in China and the US. This anthology, which includes writers for Workers' World newspapers such as Ajamu Baraka, Mumi Abu Jamal, Vijay Prashad, Margaret Kimberly, Max Blumenthal, Suhin, Lee Suhin, and Kevin Zeese, who recently passed, and more, has been censored by Amazon and other book distributors. We should not be surprised that Amazon would be censoring this book. But we're also happy to announce that the book is now available, and we need your help to get it out. So we're asking you to donate to fight the censorship, to help distribute Capitalism on a Ventilator. It is a compilation of incredible articles, and it's very, very up to date, talking about COVID, talking about how COVID was handled in China, how it was handled in the United States, which we know very well about, as well as other struggles. Supporters who give $25 to the campaign will receive a free copy of the book, and a link to the support will be put in the Zoom chat. And hopefully Tech will do that. So now we have a few questions from the audience, and we will now ask all of our panelists to weigh in if you can. Okay, so the first question, is that okay, Ezra? I'll take the first one and then you can grab the next one.
Yes.
Can someone comment on the case of C.C. McDonald, which was the last struggle that Leslie was involved in, and the parallel of what is happening today with the Black Lives Matter movement and the mounting attacks on transgender people? Because, you know, Renee read a list, but there is documentation that more transgender people were killed by August than were killed all of last year. So the attacks on transgender people are totally mounting. So can somebody talk about Leslie's role in the case of what the case was and what Leslie's role was? Would be fantastic. Uh-oh. Okay, I'm ready. But Renee, you want to say something? You have to unmute if you want to say something.
Hi. Well, basically, what happened with C.C. McDonald was that they were harassed and threatened in a life-threatening way by bigots. C.C. McDonald, a non-white trans woman, defended herself. And as is a crime under capitalism, oppressed people do not have the right to defend themselves. We recognize that right, but when that right is exercised, you must be punished. And Cece, who had, of course, the most credible defense, which was, I had to defend myself or I would have died. Period. And Leslie, who, by the way, I might add at that time, their health was already in decline. Here had been through so many attempts. I'm not even going to get into that for treatment that that Judy mentioned before. And Leslie campaigned vigorously and was another example of how Leslie used to say, one does not overshadow the other. United, the struggle for LGBTQ liberation and Black liberation are stronger because they're together. We cannot have one liberation without the other one. It is impossible. I'll never forget the scene when Leslie visited Cece in jail. And I don't want to talk too long, but just the image of Leslie putting her hand on the the panel glass that separates the visitor from the one who's been kidnapped. And I never forget seeing their hands together like this. It was a beautiful love. And there were many, how can I say this, avenues of how to resolve this. And finally, a settlement was made. And unfortunately, Cece did time, as is very common when you're up against a brutal, corrupt, racist, injustice system.
Can I just add something?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's sort of ironic, or maybe not ironic, that when Cece McDonald, who was a Black trans woman, and her companions, I hope I'm using the right pronoun, when they were attacked by a white supremacist mob in Minneapolis. Minneapolis, the same city where George Floyd was lynched in late May. So, we can't escape that irony, I don't think. But just to add on to what Renee said about this case, the fact that CC had the right to defend themselves against, this racist anti-trans attack, wound up with doing 3 years in prison. And Leslie not only visited CC and described that image of their hands touching the petition, and just the amazing smile on Cece's face, when Leslie came to visit her. But Leslie was arrested. Leslie was arrested for spray painting Free Cece on some building in Minneapolis and had to go to court.
It was actually the courthouse where Cece was sentenced.
Yeah, right.
Up to during the middle of a demonstration.
Yeah. So it's a picture in the paper that shows that too. That we made sure that Leslie wanted to make sure that that picture was taken of Z, defending or demanding that CC be freed. But Leslie eventually did get off. Didn't escape those charges. So anyway, it's but again, as Renee said, this is not an isolated situation. You have the Jersey four Black trans women who are also attacked by racist bigots in New Jersey. I think it was Newark, New Jersey. So it's not an isolated situation at all. And but Leslie again was so exemplary in showing why it's important for some, a white transgender person showing solidarity with the most oppressed, and doing everything they can to bring about justice and liberation. that was indicative of this case around CC McDonald. So I really encourage, if you want to learn more about the case, you go to workers.org and just put in CC McDonald, and a number of the articles come up around the case.
Yes.
Yeah.
And our tech crew has been putting in the links into the chat. So you can go into the chat and see the pictures and see the articles. I think we might only have time. We'll see. Maybe only have time for one more question. Ezra, can you?
Yes, definitely. Why was Leslie's support for Cuba so significant to the LGBTQ plus movement?
So Leslie's support and contributions to the LGBTQ struggle in Cuba has led to so much debunking of the reactionary rhetoric towards Cuba. I can say this as someone who grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s as a young gay child, a young gay teenager, hearing that the oppressive communist regime of, and I use that sarcastically, of Cuba oppressing gay, the LGBTQ community. And Leslie Feinberg came in with this superb analysis that said, no, you're wrong. All of this is reactionary history. And I am like, we as communists, we have a duty to unravel the reactionary revisionist history that is fed to us. And Leslie did that in Rainbow Solidarity in Defense of Cuba. Not only and I saw somebody in the comments just now asking panelists to identify themselves. Sorry, I'm Devin.
I'm working on it.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I didn't know. Sorry about that. Not only in the LGBTQ struggle, just in terms of fighting homophobia and transphobia, but as Leslie debunked so many myths about how Cuba handled the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And as someone who has studied HIV and AIDS education my entire adult life, it's critical. It is critical to debunking the myths around how a socialist country with a socialist planned economy helped fight the AIDS epidemic, while the United States, the capitalist imperialist United States, let thousands and thousands and thousands of people die when it didn't have to be like that. And Cuba said, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this through a socialist planned economy, and they had significantly less deaths. And Leslie shined a light on that when the capitalist imperialist world had such a stronghold on hiding information from Cuba to the United States. It's critical. Rainbow Solidarity in Defense of Cuba, I would call it one of the most important books of our time.
Thank you, Devin. Or anyone else want to add on? Doesn't specifically have to be about Cuba. I feel like Leslie did so much work in terms of sort of connecting the fight against imperialism, or the fight of imperialism, with the LGBTQ plus movement. And it looks like Renee has put something in about a video, Trans Havana, into the chat.
Right. Produced by Fidel's daughter, I might add.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't help but think that Leslie's work was instrumental in the creation of Senesex in Cuba, and the work that they've done on behalf of the transgender community. So, yes. Are there anyone? Oh, Miranda, would you like to say something?
Yeah, just a quick note. I remember watching a clip of Leslie speak, talking, I think it was about Laura Bush claiming to care so much about women's rights that she was going to push like war, imperialist war on Iraq, and how untrue that was. Like the U.S. lifts up the propaganda that they are the protectors of democracy and rights for all, but it excludes so many, and it's only been built and because it's drenched in blood of people who have been killed. Like Leslie's work has been critical for me to understand that when when you look at what the United States like says that socialist countries do, they do all of the same things that they're saying incorrectly, falsely, that socialist countries are doing. They are doing those things at home. And I'm very thankful to be able to make those connections through Leslie's work.
One of the things that, I think it's my turn. One of the things that I just wanted to raise for discussion, because I don't think it really came out. You know, when I first joined Workers' World Party, which was in 76, 77, can't remember exactly. One of the many roles that Leslie played at the time was that Z was incredibly supportive of the disabled community and disabled comrades. And Leslie was a sign language interpreter. And I remember seeing demonstration after demonstration, Leslie up there doing sign language interpretation. And if Z wasn't doing that, then Z was helping people who were disabled find a place close to the stage where they could sit and listen. So Leslie was incredibly sensitive on this issue. And I was wondering, you know, sort of, we now have the a disability justice and rights caucus. And so it's sort of the legacy of Leslie Feinberg to some extent, because of HERE's support work is the caucus that we now have within the party. And I was wondering if anybody else wanted to share. I didn't mean to talk as long as I did, but if anyone else wanted to share any of their.
I have a very significant one.
Okay.
It was a very early introduction to the realness of Leslie Feinberg, especially what you're saying to me now, who does use a wheelchair part-time. And that is, I went to an event to support the disabled, and Leslie was there. And I noticed, and this is, by the way, this is like, must be, I mean, maybe it was 1975, it might have been before. Whenever Leslie got into a conversation with someone who used a wheelchair, Leslie never, ever stood above them and looked down on them and spoke. And I said something to Leslie, and I said, you know, I noticed that every wheelchair user that you speak to, you crouch down to them. And Leslie said, we need to be equally on the same level so that our eyes meet on the same level. That is respect. Oh, I never, ever forgot that. And that was probably what cemented my adoration of Comrade Leslie Feinberg.
I also have, so I'm more forthcoming about this now as I get older. But I was born, I'm hearing impaired. I was born partially deaf in both ears, and I've been in denial about it for most of my all my teenage years. The reality set in around the time that I was about 23 or 24 that I am slowly going deaf. And I've always resisted learning ASL or any sort of sign language. You know, I said I've had 17 surgeries to try and correct my hearing. They have all failed. And it was just like, well, the next surgery will be the one, the next surgery will be the one. And I finally accepted it after the most recent surgery. And it was in part because after conversations with Minnie Bruce Pratt, after learning that Leslie fought so hard for sign language inclusion in the struggle, so fought so hard for disability rights, it's like I felt more empowered, after learning that. So it was like an issue of internalized ableism for me for several years. That is something that I'm no longer necessarily ashamed of, and something that I now implement into the struggle. In our own struggles, sign language interpreters are something that is desperately needed. I would call it mandatory at any rally if they are available. And it makes me feel a little bit better about what my reality is. Thanks to Leslie Feinberg for your massive contribution to disability justice and rights in the struggle for socialism. So that's all.
Thank you, Devin. I think, comrades, we do have to wrap up. We're at that hour-and-a-half time, and I want to thank the panel very much. Well, I'll thank you in a minute, but go ahead, Ezra. It's your turn.
So, everything under capitalism takes money. Any amount that you can donate will help. We will put it all into continuing the struggle to bring down this rotten, racist, and oppressive system. You can donate 3 ways. We have a Venmo, which is @WorkersWorld. You can go to the website, which is www.workers.org/donate. And we also have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/workersworldparty. That one specifically mostly goes towards providing our newspaper to imprisoned people, which is extremely important because a lot of the time they don't get a lot of reading material, and those are the people that we want to reach the most.
Thank you, Ezra. And I want to thank the entire panel for this incredibly rich discussion, not only about the life of Leslie Feinberg, not only about our memories and our experience, the way we feel about here struggles, but also about the struggles that we are still fighting in the world today, because we have much work to do. Again, and we're not putting up the slide, but I want to invite you. It's really hard to be in the struggle without a compass. And I want to ask you to consider Workers' World Party to be your compass and to join us. We reach out to us, and we will reach out to you with an organizer. And I think that together we will be stronger in the days ahead. I want to invite you to tune in. You can go to www.workers.org to join. And tune in next week, same time and same place. And we hope to see many of you in the days to come. Take care, stay safe, and build a workers' world.
And Leslie Feinberg presente.
Leslie Feinberg presente.
Presente.